All right, so I've got my dad Kevin here for the second annual bracket breakdown show. And Dad, I know this is going to be a fun NCAA tournament for you because your alma mater, the Dayton Flyers, are back in it. How you feeling about that one?
I'm excited. First time in 7 years. Tough matchup though. Nevada's going to be a tough game for them, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's not your normal 10 seed there in the Nevada Wolfpack, but I definitely think that Dayton is the type of team that could make a run. They got a lot of good shooters. They got a genuine bona fide superstar in Deron Holmes. So yeah, definitely excited to have that back in the tournament. I will forever be a Dayton fan after the fact that the 2020 season got canceled when they were having their best season of all time. So definitely happy to have them back in the tournament. So let's go ahead and get started now. And let's go ahead and give the people some tips for winning their bracket pools. So, Dad,
Okay.
what is something that people might want to do or might want to have in mind if they want to win a bracket pool in 2024?
All right. I got a few. One, obviously, and I know you're big on this, is the predictive tools. Ken Palm. I like Bartovic because you can filter by dates. So you can really kind of see who, if you filter to February 1st, you can kind of see who's been hot over the last, month and a half.
And you could pick any date for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Bartovic, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of their tools are free.
It's
too.
free. It's free.
Yeah.
You can do that filter free. So it's a good one there. Avoid picking too much based on the eye test. I heard pretty well-known basketball analyst John Rothstein today say the more you watch, the worse off you are.
I could not agree more with that. I feel like if you're going off the eye test, it needs to be with a team that you have seen all 30 games of.
Exactly. It's just in most cases, it's going to be too small of a sample size. Beware your own biases. You can tend to, and it's bit me in the past. Your favorite team can look a little better to you than you think. Also, that conference within that team, again, you've watched a lot of games, but I've gotten burnt on that in the past. So another thing is you don't want to pick too many upsets.
Okay.
On average, the lower seed wins 9 games in the first round out of 32.
Wow, that seems really low.
So I mean, if you went straight by seeding, the odds are you're going to get 23 right, which in most cases is a pretty decent bracket.
Yeah, so if you just went chalk in the first round, you could get about 72% basically.
Yeah, and out of the top, the other thing is the top 3 seeds typically win 11 of their 12 first round games. So in other words, kind of going out on a limb. Yeah, you're kind of going pick one or not at all because you're kind of going out on a limb. But don't pick more than one because you're probably not going to hit those.
Well, and the thing is with that too, with it being an average of 1 out of 12, last year was kind of the aberration with Fairleigh Dickinson beating Purdue and Princeton beating Arizona. So if you believe in law of averages, then that would mean that this year there might be 0.
Yeah. Another one, good one. You kind of want to carry the ones to the Sweet 16. They make it 85% of the time. So on average, less than one Sweet 16 team, less than one of those are going to be eliminated before the Sweet 16.
So basically, if you're mathematically building a sound bracket, just go ahead and click all the ones in for 2 rounds, and go ahead and click all the 2s in for 1 round, and go from there.
That's probably good advice. The 11s and 12s are your sweet spot for double digits making the Sweet 16.
And I've got a few of those this year.
Yeah, and in fact, ironically, more 11s make the Sweet 16 than 8s, 9s, or 10s. So
interesting.
Something to know. And on average, 3 teams seeded between 10 and 12 are going to make the Sweet 16.
So if I had to guess as to why that might be, it's probably got to be directly correlated with the fact that the 1 is getting the 8 and the 9, right? And so, if 85% of 1 seeds are making it to the Sweet 16, then that means only 15% of the 8s and 9s are making it to the Sweet 16.
Correct.
So that definitely, that second round matchup for the 10s and the 11s definitely shapes up better not having to go against a 1.
Another one. Pick one of your first 4 teams to go past the round of 64.
I like that one as well.
That's happened 11 times out of 12 seasons. So for some reason, one of those teams wins almost every year.
Well, I think you can kind of attribute that to, they get their legs going, that they kind of get that tournament atmosphere under them because, you and I both know UD Arena ends up being a rocking atmosphere for those first 4 games.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's no like sleepy, drowsy type of environment to go in. It's you get your feet wet, get in the tournament, get in a little bit of a rhythm, and carry that on over into your next game 2 days later. So that's interesting that that's a trend that happens.
Yeah, and I think those teams, once they get that win, they're kind of playing with house money. So definite trend there. You don't want to be over influenced by what happened over the weekend with conference tournaments.
That's a good one too.
Only 9 of the last 20 national champions won their conference tournament. That's 45%,
Wow.
and only 3 of the last 10. So don't be over dramatic by that. My last advice is don't pick if there's an overwhelming favorite, don't pick them to win the national championship, because
that's gonna carry right into what I'm gonna say.
If you pick somebody else, if you pick somebody else, you're competing and you hit it, you're competing with a smaller pool of people to win. And it gives you it's going to really give you a much better chance.
So what you just described, and I know you don't play on DraftKings or FanDuel, but what you just described was a perfect DFS principle, which is the principle of ownership, right? And so, basically, if I'm picking UConn and 40% of people are picking UConn, then I've got to beat those 40% with the other 67 games in my bracket, as opposed to me going out on a limb and picking a national champion. And then if that team wins, then I only need to beat 5 people.
And I mean, if you look at betting odds, UConn really only has about a 20% probability of winning it all. So even though
significantly more than that,
it's more than anybody else, but it doesn't mean UConn or the field. The odds are it's going to be the field.
So what you just did there, perfect lead into me. My number one tip for the brackets is going to be don't be afraid to be different. And it's based off of that DFS principle. You've got to find the right ways to get leverage on who you're playing in a pool against. And so, for us, I know we're situated in North Carolina. A lot of people, when we do pools, pick North Carolina to win it all, and they pick Duke to go to the Final Four or win it all. Yep. So, knowing when to eliminate them, or, knowing when to eliminate a team that's a favorite like UConn, you can get leverage on everybody else if you're able to get those points if that team ends up bowing out early. So that would be my number one tip for winning a bracket pool. And really, the years that I've had the most success in bracket pools are the years where I got the national champion right. And it wasn't because I picked the overwhelming favorite. It was because I picked the team that wasn't expected to win it all. Like in 2014, I had Michigan State to win it all, and they made it to the Elite Eight. That was the crazy year UConn won it all. And my bracket was really good because nobody had any of the Final Four pretty much. And by me, not necessarily getting the Final Four right myself, but by not having the other teams that didn't make it, I still had leverage on all the earlier games, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
All right, so now let's go ahead and switch gears just a little bit. Let's talk about who might be a potential Cinderella for this tournament. So who might be that team where, they become the national story, that they get the glass slipper, they're the darling that everybody's rooting for. Who might be that team in this year's bracket? Who do you think?
I think I'm going to give you 2.
Okay, I've got 2 as well.
One is New Mexico. They are the most underseeded team in the tournament per KenPom. A lot of people seem to be picking up on this, so it may not become as much of a shock as it might be. They're the highest rated double-digit team per KenPom. They'll be favored in their first round game they are favored against Clemson. And they're also, if they got to Baylor, they would only be a 3-point underdog per KenPom.
So pretty much you've got an 11 seed in New Mexico that is not going to be a significant underdog in either of their first 2 games pretty much.
Yeah, and they should be a 6. They should be like a 6 per their KenPom.
Yeah, if you look at where they're at in KenPom, they're currently 23rd, which is 1 behind Kansas, who's a 4 seed. And then that also trails San Diego State and St. Mary's, who's a 5 seed. Like, this team is not your normal 11 seed.
Yeah. The other one I would watch out for is Oregon.
Okay.
Dana Altman has taken them to the tournament 7 times, and every time they've won their first round game, and 5 out of the 7 they've advanced to the Sweet 16 or better, and
that's
with 2 Elite Eights and 1 Final Four. So he seems to know how to coach in the tournament. And if I'm not mistaken, they had a big man out early that they've gotten back. So their metrics may be understated.
Yeah, Nafali Dante did not play much of the non-conference for them. He was out at the beginning of the season. And he's, in my opinion, their best player. I watched a lot of their Pac-12 tournament run, and he's just a dominant force down low. And I really like that call with Oregon as well. I definitely have them winning their first round game. I don't know if I recall having them win their second round game, but I definitely have them slipping past round one. And that's a team that, you were talking earlier about Bartorvik. You filter by like any date in February or March, and that's going to be a team that pops up because that's a team that is getting hot at the right time.
Yeah.
So now for my two nominees for this, I went really off the board. I went with some true mid-majors here. So the first one that I'm going to have is going to be Samford out of the SoCon, right? They are a team that is playing what they now call buckyball. And I'm not going to lie to you. When I first heard that, I thought they called it buckyball because of their proximity to, the gas station Buc-ee's being in there in Alabama. But it's actually named for their head coach, Bucky McMillan, who is a former high school coach. But Bucky McMillan is he's like one short of Paul Westhead in terms of the tempo that he wants them to play at, in terms of the pace that he wants them to play at. They rank 14th in the nation in tempo, and they are going to full court press you, and they're going to play a lot of guys, and they're going up against a Kansas team that we don't know the health of Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough. And this is also a Kansas team that, according to KenPom, is overseeded. They do not deserve a 4 seed, according to KenPom. And so I think that this is a terrible matchup for a Kansas team that is limping in, has no depth, and is going to be asked to play 40 minutes of run and gun up and down basketball against Samford. And I really think Samford gets past this game. And then if they do get past that game against Kansas, then they get Gonzaga, who also does not have much depth, or McNeese State, who is not any more talented than Samford. So I really like the way this bracket sets up for Samford, and I think they could be a 13 seed that enters the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick.
All right, now I do have one more for you, and that is going to be the Drake Bulldogs. They first got their head coach, Darian DeVries. They started from the bottom, and now they're here. But then they got Tucker DeVries, who's his son, and nothing has been the same since. He is their best player. He is a legitimate bona fide superstar. But it's not just all him, though. They've got a big man in Darnell Brody, who was very sought after in the transfer portal, was a guy that could have transferred up if he wanted to and chose not to and came back. This is also a team that they went back-to-back in the Missouri Valley Conference this year. They got themselves some big rings by winning that conference tournament, and they take care of the basketball. They have a really low turnover rate. That's something that I really looked at with some of these teams when you get in the weeds with stats is, can they generate extra possessions by not turning the ball over or by getting offensive rebounds? And this is a team that does it by not turning the ball over. So I really do like them. They're 13th in offensive efficiency in KenPom. They have a really good win against Nevada in non-conference where they beat them by 19. And they are ranked 51 in KenPom, which is only 9 behind their first-round opponent, Washington State. So I really think that this Drake team is setting up pretty good. Last year, they played Miami in the tournament. So this isn't just one dance for Drake. This is the second time they've been. And they played Miami pretty much to the final buzzer last year. And I think they would call it a fair trade if they were able to take that loss last year, but get a Cinderella run this year. And so if you're filling out your bracket, put in Drake, and you can thank me later when they're in the Sweet 16. And if they do that, then this bracket might be the best I ever had. Dad, please tell me you got some of those references I was making.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you knew I had to do it with a team named Drake.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's transition on over now. Instead of a Cinderella run, let's talk about the opposite of a Cinderella run. Who is a high seed that is on upset alert? Who is one of the highest seeds that will not make it out of the opening weekend? What do you think?
I've got two possibilities. One of them you're not going to like.
Oh, boy.
Kentucky.
Okay.
They're the second lowest rated team among the top 4 seeds in KenPom. Mm-hmm. They are horrible defensively, 108th in the country, and only two sub 100 KenPom defenses have ever made it to the Final Four.
Interesting. Now, can I make a counter argument?
Yeah,
I think that metric is there defensively because they were bad.
Okay. They'd only be favored by a point and a half.
But keep going. I want to see how you finish.
32. the other thing is if they don't get Texas Tech, NC State's on a roll, having beaten North Carolina and Duke. Now they could come out flat this week, but NC State is capable of playing with anybody. So
Absolutely.
The other one, and I would not pick this just because I've already told you not to pick against 1 seeds going to the Sweet 16. But North Carolina is overseeded per KenPom. They should be a 3 seed, and they're looking at a potential matchup against a Tom Izzo coach Michigan State team that
never bet against Izzo and March.
almost always overperforms when they're underseeded.
Yeah,
their best runs are when they're 7 seeds or lower. So, and they may not get past Mississippi State, but I would be terrified of that. And really, even if they do play Michigan State, Carolina would only be a 4 or 5 point favorite.
Right, 4-point favorites.
I think they're dangerous. I wouldn't pick it, but I think there's a danger there.
I would definitely agree with that. That whole West region terrifies me. Like I really think that is the hardest region to handicap. Starting at the top with Carolina, all the way to the bottom with Arizona. I had a really tough time picking a Final Four nominee out of that region. I really did.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, there could be a sleeper coming out of that one. I could see somebody 4 or lower winning that easily.
Maybe the Dayton Flyers.
Maybe.
Now, so my team that I'm picking against for opening weekend. Now, again, this goes against what we said earlier with the 1 seeds, but I'm terrified of what this 1 seed looks like right now, and that is Houston. Last season, one thing that is really, really quickly forgotten in the NCAA tournament of last season is that UConn was the healthiest team at the end of the season. Alabama had major injuries. Houston had major injuries. Texas had a major injury. And UConn was kind of the best team left that stayed completely healthy. And I don't want any part of a team that's not completely healthy. Houston has already lost their backup guard, Terrence Arsenault, for the season. They have already lost backup big Joseph Tugler for the season. And now Juwan Roberts, their starting power forward, is battling an injury. So I really am uncertain about this Houston team with the fact that they're just coming in not healthy. And you see that bear itself out in the Big 12 title game that they lost to Iowa State, where they only scored 41 points. This is a team that can be pretty offensively constipated. Like, I've watched them a few times this year. I've watched them play Dayton. I've watched them play Texas twice. I've watched their other big games against Kansas and Baylor and Iowa State and the like. And they really rely on their guards, who are really good, making tough shots. And I would prefer a team that takes an easier path than that. I would prefer a team who gets off good shots as opposed to a team who's reliant on bad shots. So Houston is the team that I'm very wary of. The matchup, I think that Nebraska and Texas A&M is totally contrasting styles for their second round opponent. Nebraska is going to try to speed you up, and they're going to chuck a lot of threes. Texas A&M is just going to try to get every rebound. Like, if Houston and Texas A&M played, like, they might as well put on boxing gloves. Because that's going to be a physical dogfight. But I just think that either way, Houston's health has me really concerned with what they're looking at for this first weekend.
Yeah, I would a week ago I would have picked them to win it all, but what happened Saturday just kind of scares me with Houston.
Yeah,
there's only ever been 2 national over the last 20 years. There's only ever been 2 national champions to lose a pre-tournament game by more than 20 points all season.
Wow.
So
that's
the
staggering.
fact that they got buried like that, that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah. So now let's switch gears a little bit. Instead of talking about a top seed that is going to go down before the first weekend is over, is there a round 1 upset lock that you have? Or is there a game that you think you're really confident against, either the spread or straight up, you're really confident against or about this lower seeded team either covering or winning outright?
Going by seed, I would say New Mexico, but it's not a huge upset because they're actually favored over Clemson.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
And all the metrics would tell you that they'd beat them. My upset it is going to be James Madison over Wisconsin.
I like that one as well.
And it's more of a gut thing than stats. If you look, James Madison beat Michigan State earlier in the year. They've been pretty consistent all year. Wisconsin had a pretty brutal Big Ten tournament. It's possible they come into the NCAA tournament a little bit tired.
Yeah,
So
like that's got to be
I think that's one of those 5-12 upsets that tends to happen.
Yeah, it's really hard to put any kind of like number to quantify that, but it's got to be a little bit of an emotional letdown for Wisconsin to come off that Big Ten tournament loss, right? Like they really went all out in that tournament. They were playing guys hurt. They were playing guys who clearly weren't 100%, and they wanted to win that conference tournament, and they did not. And so, that's going to be a tough mental challenge for Wisconsin. So I do like the pick of JMU to either cover that game or win outright for sure. So mine is going to be a little different. I am going to pick a team to cover. That in my bracket, I'm going to pick outright, but I feel really confident about them covering, and it is College of Charleston going up against Alabama. So Alabama is a team that is slumping. They have lost 4 out of their last 6 games, and both of these teams play a super high variance style. Both of these teams take a ton of three-pointers, and three-pointers lead to variance because when you're taking shots that are farther away from the basket, there's less predictability in whether or not it goes in. And so that creates an environment where if Alabama has a poor shooting night and Coastal Carolina has a good shooting night, then Coastal Carolina could beat the brakes off of them, as opposed to, if all these teams are taking twos, then, the difference in that's going to be a little less. So College of Charleston plays a style that if they get hot, they absolutely could blow out Alabama. But even if they just play to their par, to their baseline, Alabama's such a poor defensive team that if Charleston just makes enough of those three-pointers, they're going to hang around and hang in the game, if not win the game outright. So that is my upset call in round 1, is the 13-4 Charleston over Alabama.
I think you got a good one there.
All right, so now let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. We're not going to pick all 67 games because that would not make for good content, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and go over our Final Four picks. So would you rather you go all 4, or would you rather go region by region?
Let's go region by region.
Okay, so who do you have coming out of the East?
I have Auburn.
Interesting.
They should be a 1 seed per KenPom,
mm-hmm.
and they are top 10 offensively and defensively. And when I look at their metrics, they look like a national champion to me.
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut could easily beat them, but I'm going to go a little contrarian on this one, and I think Auburn is a good value pick there.
So I actually have Auburn as well coming out of this region. Like you said, the rating in KenPom really has me encouraged. Believe it or not, last year UConn came into the tournament ranked 4th in KenPom, just like Auburn did. So if you're a little bit superstitious or if you think that's a trend, like there you go, right? But what I really like about Auburn is they play a lot of guys. And to me, you have to have bench depth to be a national champion. And so this team, they go legitimately 10 deep. And, they come at you wave after wave after wave. And I think that gives them the advantage. They're not overly dependent on one guy getting in foul trouble or one guy scoring 30 points to win. So that's a lot of the reason why I like Auburn to take this region. So now let's go to the bottom left corner, the West region. Who do you have coming out of the West? And then
I've got Arizona.
Okay.
Like I said, North Carolina looks a little bit overseeded. To be honest, I think this is the one you may see some surprise come completely out of the, 6 seed or below, win it. And New Mexico certainly is one that sticks out to me. But I just like I said, you look at the metrics on Carolina, and I just feel like they're ripe for the picking. And Arizona gets to the Sweet 16, and it's going to be in Los Angeles, and they'll probably have a friendlier crowd than anybody else. It'll be like a pseudo home game. So I'm going to go with Arizona.
So I ended up going with the 1 seed. I ended up going with North Carolina, and really at the end of the day, it's just because I couldn't in good conscience pick anybody else. Like, I'll be honest, I had New Mexico going to the Elite 8, and I just didn't feel comfortable clicking New Mexico over North Carolina. I had Dayton beating Arizona. I had New Mexico beating Baylor. I had Charleston beating Alabama. So I had all the top seeds in this region going down early except for North Carolina. And so they became the team that I clicked in my Final Four for that reason. I just couldn't pull the trigger on anybody else. So this is probably the one I'm the least confident in, which is ironic because it's the 1 seed.
Having watched, the metrics tell you have some red flags on Carolina. Having watched them though, the eye test is very good. I mean, they've got two really, they've got at least two NBA players in Baycott and Davis,
Yeah.
and shooting around them. So, and they play decent defense. It's just just some of the metrics is kind of what scared me on them, and then that potential matchup with Izzo. But
Yeah.
I could easily see him getting there.
All right, so that is the first half of the bracket. Let's go to the upper right corner now, the South region. The region where Houston is the 1 seed. Do you have the 1 seed Houston, or did you go somebody different?
I actually did go with Houston to make the Final Four. As you know, I've been pretty high on them all year long.
Mm-hmm.
They defend at an incredibly high level, and their offense is okay. I believe it's top 20 or close to it.
17th last time I checked.
So it's not bad. I honestly think they would have won it last year had they been healthy. And I'm just I'm not, Marquette at the 2, Kolik's hurt. They've got issues. I just don't, Kentucky metrically, again, eye test great, metrically scary, but at the end of the day, I think Houston's got enough to get it done.
So I am actually going to go with Kentucky in this region, and it's for no other reason than their ceiling. I think that Kentucky's ceiling is higher than any other team in this region. You already hit the nail on the head with Marquette. Kolik's health scares me. And then Houston, their health scares me. And we've already mentioned how much we like James Madison over Wisconsin. And I don't all the way trust Duke. I don't think Duke's a great defensive team. So Kentucky is the team that I really think has the highest ceiling in this group. Now, granted, could they come out and lay an egg against Oakland or lay an egg against Texas Tech or NC State? Absolutely. That team's laid plenty of eggs this season. But when they're all playing together and when they're all rolling, that team looks really good. And so that is why I trust Calipari to get it right, to get them rolling, and to get Kentucky into the Final Four this year.
They certainly have a high ceiling.
I mean, is there anybody else in this region who has 2 NBA players on their team, and Kentucky's got like 4? Like maybe Duke, if you want to make that argument, but like I just think that just the talent, man, like it's got to get there, and so that's why I'm going with Kentucky. Okay, now the Midwest. So this is probably the most interesting one in my opinion, because I think there's a lot of teams in this one, not even just the top seeds, but a lot of teams who have the ceiling to make a run. So the 1 seed is Purdue. Did you pick Matt Painter to make his first Final Four, or did you go outside the box?
I went with Purdue.
Okay.
They've got the metrics of a national champion. They've played an incredibly tough schedule. If you look at that bracket, to me it's almost a walk to the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
With a depleted Kansas team, I just don't see the competition there. They could run into a tough Tennessee or a Texas team in the Elite Eight that could derail that. But I don't know. I think they're due. And
I agree. And I went with Purdue as well. I really think the bottom half of this bracket is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Like, if it ends up being Oregon, Creighton, Texas, Tennessee, those are 4 dangerous teams and toss-up games, in my opinion, of 4 teams that are playing good basketball right now. And so I didn't really feel all that confident in picking any of them to go to the Sweet 16 or to the Elite Eight. And so it kind of just leads to Purdue, they've just been super consistent. They have the most unstoppable force in college basketball in Zach Edey. And to me, the most interesting thing with Purdue is last year, they were not a great shooting team. And this year, they have been a great shooting team. And that has helped a lot of – now it makes it tougher to double Zach Edey. It makes it tougher to guard Zach Edey and screen and roll. It just makes everything more difficult when they're hitting their threes, which they have done for the most part this season. Now, do I still worry a little bit about somebody Fairleigh Dickinsoning them or St. Petersing them where they go with a junk defense or they try to go 5 out or something like that? Yeah, that's a possibility, but I think they're much more equipped to battle that this year than they have been in the previous 2 years. So that's why I went with Purdue to make the Final Four out of this region. Okay, so now we got to go with the national champ, right? So we both had Auburn, and you had Arizona over North Carolina. Who do you have reaching the national title game on that side? Because I think we might end up with the same team.
I've got Auburn.
I've got Auburn as well. So glad to know we're in agreement with that. Believe it or not, it may have a 4 next to Auburn's name and a 1 or a 2 next to Carolina or Arizona. But according to KenPom, Auburn will be the favorite in that game.
Yeah. You kind of got to look at Auburn as a 1 seed.
To me, the thing is with Auburn is like, if they get past UConn, which if we have them in the Final Four, we're obviously predicting them to do. If we have them getting past UConn, like, who else can they not beat? Like it's all downhill after that, right? Like you knock down the champ, you knock down the best team in the nation. So who can you not beat? And so that's why I have Auburn winning that game. On the other side, you had Houston and Purdue. Who do you have coming out of that one?
I've got Purdue.
Interesting, because I've got Purdue as well. We did not really confer about this part of it, but we ended up with the same 2 teams. No. So I've got Purdue as well. I think that whether they were going up against Houston or Kentucky, I don't think that either of those teams are a good matchup for Purdue, particularly.
I mean, you look at it, they've only lost 4 games, and all of them were super close, even the ones they have lost. And, and then you're talking about a Wisconsin team they played twice earlier.
And that game went to overtime as well.
That game went to overtime. They're just very consistent. They've been very consistent this year.
To me, if a team were to knock off Purdue, it would have to be a team who can guard Zach Edey, but also spread him out. Like I really think you would need like an athletic, good defensive 5. And so looking at their bracket, maybe Gonzaga could be that, but I don't think there's a great chance that Gonzaga even gets to that point.
Yeah.
Texas with Dylan Dessou could be that, but it's going to be really hard for them to get to that point. And Creighton with Ryan Kalkbrenner could maybe be that a little bit. But again, it's really hard for all those teams to get to that point. And so Purdue could end up, not playing anybody who's really a bad matchup for them all the way till the national title game, which is what we both have.
Yeah.
All right. So now we both have the same national title game. We've got Auburn v. Purdue. So who do you have in this one? Let's close it out. Let's see if we ended up with the same team.
I'm going to pick Auburn.
Okay, so we do end up with different teams.
It's this one to me is a coin flip. I think Auburn's the value pick here because I don't think you're going to have a lot of people pick Auburn to win the national championship.
I would agree,
especially coming out of that same bracket as Connecticut. I think Purdue is probably going to be the second most popular pick.
See, I actually don't think that, but carry on.
Yeah, it could not, but this one could go either way. You mentioned somebody having an athletic big to go to counter Edey, and Auburn has that in Broome. So, it was tough. Agonized over this one quite a bit, but I decided, I'm gonna take Auburn. They're less likely to. It's almost a toss up on per KenPom, but Purdue would be the favorite, I think, probably by about 2 or 3. But I'm just gonna go contrarian all the way and pick Auburn.
See, I went with Purdue. But I actually think it's going to be kind of contrarian because, if you think about every casual filling out a bracket, right? They're going to remember Fairleigh Dickinson last year.
Yeah.
Especially if they had Purdue to win it all.
They've lost to double-digit seeds 3 years in a row. So
and Matt Painter's never reached a Final Four.
Yeah. So, there's some history there that could prohibit it. Purdue, Connecticut, and Auburn are the 3 teams that, if you look at them, have the metrics that match up, the profiles that match up with national champions. The other, top 6 in KenPom, top 25, top 20 offensive and defense. Those teams are the ones that match the profile. I went away from Connecticut to be contrarian, and I'm going to go all the way with Auburn along those lines.
I definitely think if you're trying to win a pool, you put yourself in a position that if Auburn makes that national title game and then wins, you're golden. Because not that many people are going to have it, but yet if you know the metrics, if you know how to use KenPom, you know how to use Bar Torvik, Auburn's a team that really does pop up and give a lot of value.
And if you were gonna make any kind of bet on a national champion, I think Auburn's gives you your best value. They're
they're really good value.
They're 16 to 1, and they're just a better.
And
you're getting more for your money on that one than you would any of the
and
other
call me
ones.
crazy, but like if Auburn were the 4 seed in Houston's region, like would they not be like, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 to 1 because they wouldn't be in UConn's region? Like I think that they
I
kind of
think
got
that's
both teams kind of got a little bit
got
hosed.
them. Yeah, I think that's got them. That's got them
I,
undervalued. They really got hosed on the seed lines. Looking at their metrics, it really shocks me that
I really felt like
they're a
last
4.
year. Last year, it was a similar scenario with Houston being a 1 and Texas being a 2. And it looked like we were on a collision course to that game till both those teams got hurt. But I really felt the same way last year, where like both of those teams were great bets because their odds were depleted because they were in each other's region. And I
Yeah,
feel the same way about UConn and Auburn. Like
yeah,
one of those teams is very likely to win this region. And once that team passes the Sweet 16, they're probably the favorite
yeah.
to win it.
There's going to be a lot of brackets imploding if Auburn beats Connecticut in the Sweet 16.
Correct. Or we didn't even talk about this possibility. What if somebody like FAU were to beat UConn in the round of 32 and then Auburn just has this
Yeah,
cakewalk all the way?
that's possible too.
So for me picking Purdue, I think it would be perfect symmetry if, Virginia loses to UMBC. The next year they win a national championship,
Mm-hmm.
although there was a ton of controversy that went on with that. A lot of very lucky
Yeah,
plays.
and ironically, some of it involved Auburn.
Yeah, also true.
Which this Auburn team reminds me a lot of that 2019 team as well.
They do. They're very athletic. They're better than the metrics, or they're better in the metrics than their seed. That team came into the tournament like 8th or something like that in KenPom, and very well could have won the national championship that year if not for some questionable officiating.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like Virginia went from rock bottom to the penthouse, and now it's Purdue's turn where they ran it back with just about everybody on the roster. They still have Zach Edey, the most unstoppable player on the sport, and I think me and you were talking about this weekend, like. Edey never gets in foul trouble. Like, if you think about every other team in the nation and their best player gets in foul trouble, and that team is screwed. Like when I watch Texas and Dylan Dessou gets in foul trouble, they're done. Deron Holmes gets in foul trouble, they're done. Edey never gets in foul trouble. And so to me, that kind of makes them a little more upset proof than they have been in previous years, is the fact that they have the most unstoppable player in the nation, and he's going to be on the floor.
Yeah.
All right, so that does it for the full bracket preview. So, Dad, thank you for joining me. This was an absolute blast.
My pleasure.
So, if you would like to compete against us two in a bracket pool, reach out to me directly, and I will make sure to get it to you. It is a private group. I'm not opening up to the public. It will be for slightly more than entertainment purposes, only slightly. And so, if you are watching this and you want to compete, reach out to me. Let me know, and I will make sure to get you in it and find a way to get you in it. And whether or not you beat us with our own strategy or whatever, that's okay. Because my picks are probably going to change 50 million times between now and Thursday. But I'm definitely excited for this bracket, definitely excited for this NCAA tournament. So that pretty much does it for this show. So Dad, really big time thank you for joining me. Really had a blast doing this. I know we talk about college basketball all the time, so it's real nice to do it, in a forum like this where we have a little bit of an audience.
Definitely. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and close it out there. If you've been with us for this long, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.